Hello, and welcome back. Or if you've never been here, welcome. My name is Julie. Today we're going to talk about trauma, and we'll do some sort of reading. I'm not exactly sure what the reading will be, but first I want to discuss what I learned about trauma today in a seminar that I participated in. It was 4 hours long, and it was based on a certain healing modality for childhood trauma, for children who were in trauma. And the basic premises that I've always been talking about and with regards to trauma were there. And also it made me realize something about the way I have addressed certain behaviors when they've come up in readings. Because I feel like after learning what I did in the class today, or I should say putting together the information in the way that the class presented it, I just sort of feel like if I could do it all over again, even for those readings where someone was being called out for being sort of like abusive or mean to other people, I feel like I may have given a tone of disapproval during those readings at times. And I think that it would have been more appropriate or more effective for the healing of the person whose reading that was if I could be present with that feeling and express authentically what that made me feel. Because in fact, the behaviors were a reflection of a person who was wired for threat and who was behaving based on that, and who was behaving in a way that they knew how, that they were coping with life through. And it's always important to find a way to cope with life, right? Until we can be present, we've got to cope. And then, hopefully we do come to that time when we can be present with ourselves. We can sort of just like give ourselves the love and understanding that healing actually requires. So, even though my readings have been more about empowering others, empowering you to have the tools to heal yourself and be with yourself, I think that given we are in this container together and we have this space together, it only makes sense that I offer that to you as well. Because I am prepared to and equipped with, I am equipped to and prepared with the understanding and the patience and the empathy. I've been really hesitant to use my empathy a lot in my professional work and in any sort of instance where I'm assisting someone with their healing process. And that is because for many years, my trauma, along with low boundaries, along with the want to connect with another being, caused me to take in and amplify whatever they were feeling, and then kind of feel drowned by it, feel overwhelmed by it too. And when I learned how I could heal that in myself and not have to take on and use empathy to amplify the other person's energy or to try to connect with them anymore, I sort of just backed off from it, and it was replaced with compassion, which is a higher vibration to be in, which is unconditional love. And I think it's not bad to offer compassion, but I do see, as a result of this course, they were teaching people to use empathy in the healing of traumas with children. And since empathy, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do understand that here I am working with adults, right? So adults, I feel like there can be some discernment for me on whether or not I use empathy. And I think that perhaps I would allow it for myself at times more often, because sometimes it will benefit you to have that feeling amplified and to have someone be present with you in the feeling, not just telling you to be present with the feeling. So we're going to just experiment and try these things out. They're small steps and shifts in just the way that I've been doing things. But I think it will also be conducive to creating a more safe, gentle container. And that is more conducive to healing as well. And the reason why we're talking about trauma and the reason why we're talking about healing and all this kind of stuff is because, as you know, if you've been following along for a while, my readings do tend to focus on shadow work, subconscious things, coping mechanisms, eighth house stuff, the hurt parts of us. So that's why it would be important for me in particular to create a safe container. So let me just look at my notes here from this class, which was so worthwhile. And I'm really glad I took the time, even though it was a lot of time, to sit still. I was really glad that I took the time to sit in on it, because just sometimes hearing something from somebody else's perspective, even though you're looking at the same thing, it's like looking at that piece of information through a different window. It can really help expand the awareness around it, right, when they share that view. And so that's what this has done for me. It's kind of expanded my awareness by looking at the same stuff I was always looking at, but now looking at it through another window as well, which, broadens my view and makes me realize that there's just simple tweaks that I could make in my process, which actually feel really good, right? Like I feel more gentle and free, because just kind of rearranging the information in my mind freed me. And as a result of having the information put the way it was, I was able to reach out to my children and sort of start what I feel like could be a mending process. And that's really my way of experimenting with the information the way it was presented to me today in the seminar, right? Because, like I said, she's advocating for the use of empathy, which is something that I wasn't using in my practice. I was using compassion, and I want to see how that looks and what that does, for the process of actually just having a conversation with someone who is traumatized. This isn't like information where I'm using it to go in and now try to change my family members' lives and heal all their trauma. No, it's information that's given me the awareness that I actually can offer myself in a way that shows that I'm more willing to be present and more desiring of understanding them, rather than always feeling like I'm the mom and I need to fix this. Because what I realized was, I'm just kind of getting a few tears as I say this, but the way that I had been relating to my children, my behaviors, when I looked at them as a matter of just trying to apply the information I was learning to my own life to see how it worked and fit, I realized my behaviors were showing me that I was acting with my children in such a way that showed I was sort of like wanting to help them do better and feel better, And I was uncomfortable with them when they were talking negatively about themselves or each other or life. And it was all because I felt like if they were having a bad time in life, if they were speaking negatively, if they were feeling hopeless about something or hurt or just not having a bright outlook, then I felt like I had failed as a mother. And because I didn't want to let myself feel like I failed as a mother, instead my response to them expressing anything like negative, a negative view of life or someone else or an experience they had, I would just try to share like a higher view with them, which which was not conducive to building a relationship with them based on connection, right? Because I was skipping over completely the part where I would want to understand them. And if I had, say, for example, one of my children was expressing that they have a negative experience every time they talk to a certain person in their life. And the healing part of me was thinking, oh, well, everything that you see outside of you is really in you, so the only control you have is over yourself, so you could just really like work on yourself to alleviate that situation. But what my child is actually sharing with me is that they're they're feeling bad about one of their relationships in life. They don't feel like they have a good relationship with this person. And you know what I'm doing? if I just try to tell them how to change that, I'm not accepting that that's the case, and I'm not being present with the part of them who feels hurt by that. And I'm totally trying to bypass their experience and their feeling for them, just so that I don't have to feel like I have failed as a mother. So I had to sit with my own feelings of sadness or worry that I failed as a mother. And then I was able to kind of just start some conversations with my children, to which none of them have replied. But I just knew that my tone, my demeanor, my intention had all shifted. So I just wanted to like start a conversation with them based on that new place I was at, and see if I could also continue on with being the person who wants to understand them instead of avoid feeling like a bad mother, you know? Instead of try to fix them. Because really they're adults now. The time for that's done unless they ask me, you know? I really, really do have to change that. Because I had spent some time with my son yesterday, one of them. And he kept making jokes. And then, so this is what he said to me. He's like, Mom, I keep making jokes and we both laugh, but then you try to explain yourself. And he was like, how come you don't get my jokes? And this was what he said to me as I was leaving him for the day, because we had spent some time together during the day. And I was like, okay, I got what you're saying, and I'll try to do better. And I just left with that. And then today I did that trauma class, and so I was just realizing, like, that was my son. So the experience he was creating was letting me know how he feels, right? So he created the experience where I felt like I felt like I needed to. His jokes were like self-deprecation in some cases, or just sort of like sarcasm. And that's so not my humor, you know? I don't do those things. I don't appreciate those things. So to watch my son doing it was painful, even though yeah, I did laugh with him initially, but mostly my laughter come from the shock value of when he would say these things. That's my humor. Shock value is my humor. Or dry humor is my humor without sarcasm. So, sometimes it was that he was just stating a fact, right? But then it's like if he's stating that as a fact, and it's funny in the moment because of the timing he's expressing it, but then it's like, oh, well, if he's expressing that, that means there's something wrong there and I should fix it, right? And no, actually, he just wanted to feel like I cared how he felt. That's all he wanted. He didn't want me to fix it. He just wanted me to be with him in that feeling. That's it. It was that simple, and I missed it every time, for like a long time now, years. Even though my relationship with my boys, is better than it's ever been, this new kind of reality check that I've had is really, really helpful, I think, and 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 will allow me to actually be a better mother rather than being scared that I wasn't a good enough mother. So that was kind of cool. So let me tell you about some of the things that I picked up from the class. So she was talking about examples and telling stories to show how children create the environment where they can show what they need. Because children don't always verbalize what they need. Now, the reason I'm even sharing this information is because we all have that inner child. So this information is relevant for us if we're healing ourselves, but also if we have children, it's helpful information. So, and also the name of her program is called, hold on, I know it's called something. Interplay. And her name is Donna Berry Interplay. So if you feel called to look into it further, feel free. I know she's going to offer another free seminar in the future, so it's worthwhile if you do come across that. So she's suggesting that, we're not trying to change the child. We're not going to, disciplining the behaviors out of them, that the behaviors are actually how they show us what their needs are. And if we just let them, they'll create the situation where what they need can be provided. And this is all unconscious for the child, right? Because we are self-healing beings in general. Humans are self-healing beings. And she mentions that in her practice, she likes to work with the child and the parents together because the healing process is a together process. It's not like there's something wrong with your child, so you go get them treated or diagnosed. It's actually like, no, let's work together here because relationships are actually how we heal. And it's the relationships that get broken, the connection that it never happened, that is the cause of unmet needs and hence behaviors. All right, so relationships heal. Create what they need in relationship. So this has to do with like when the first 3 years of life shape the whole life. And anything that happens to the mom in the pregnancy happens to the baby too. And 5 days after conception, at the implementation, is that the right word? So when at 5 days after the child is conceived and in the womb, anything that's happening to the mom remains forever with that child, because this is the the time that part of the nervous system is being developed. At day 7, the nervous system is being developed. So things that are happening during these periods of time, during the pregnancy, are really, really huge. And as we know, a lot of moms don't even know they're pregnant at this time. 5 days and 7 days after conception. But what's happening there is literally the fetus is being wired for threat or wired for safety, depending on how the mother's experiencing life. And this is including her internal thoughts. So, say it's a young teen and she has sex and it's unprotected, and now she worries every day, oh, am I pregnant? I don't hope I'm not pregnant, That's what this new child, if there is a pregnancy, is being imprinted with. And that would be a threat, wired for threat. Because why? Their life is under threat. Because they're not even wanted in the mind of the mother. And so you can see how it's very easy to kind of have trauma be what shapes your life and guides you through life. So if you are wired for safety, that means the mother is living, a comfortable life with her needs met and feels safe in life. So that looks much different than a mother who's not in that position. And so any baby that ends up wired for threat is going to come up with what she called adaptive defenses. Meaning they're going to have to figure out how to live in life in a way that gets them through, given that life is full of threat. And that's what their behaviors will reflect. Their behaviors will reflect a need for safety. And another one who I've heard talk about this concept is Dr. Bruce Lipton. You've probably heard me mention him before if you've been watching my channel. So he also has shared this kind of information that, what the mother is thinking of herself literally shapes the baby. And I certainly cried a lot when I learned this back then when Dr. Bruce Lipton was sharing it, because I knew that when I conceived my babies, when I carried my babies, I knew that I was full on in trauma, and I was really suffering. And the good news is we can recover from these things. The good news is we can rebuild connection. So there's no need to kind of wallow in guilt and self-blame and things like that. But if we are traumatized and we are wired for threat, we have a tendency to do that, to self-blame and wallow and worry, feel guilty. So when these adaptive defenses are behaviors that are seeking for safety, which is sometimes control over the environment, right? But these can also look very maladaptive to others. But in fact, it's like when we adopt a coping mechanism for life, like that becomes our vehicle to navigate through life with, right? And we need that. We need a vehicle to navigate through life with, or we won't navigate through life. So when we try to punish a child out of their adaptive defenses, now we're really compounding an issue, you see? And then we get parents that are mad and resentful. And usually the whole reason why they are trying to punish an adaptive defense out of a child is because they were already in their own trauma state anyway, because these things are passed along right? Okay, so this adaptive defense is the way that the child takes care of themselves, and that's required for their sense of safety. Whatever that is, everyone's unique. But the basic premise is safety is required to live on, to live. And self-preservation, these are natural kind of instincts. So the world calls this defiant or naughty behavior, but actually it's an adaptive defense that the child is using to survive given their wiring for safety. And I'll add that this is what is carried through into adulthood, that the behaviors are actually what's being used to survive given the wiring for safety. Others struggle with the adaptive defensive of a child or an adult who's still using the adaptive measures, especially in generational adaptations. So it's like when the parent is in trauma and the child is in trauma, these will be activating each other's trauma constantly, right? And so no one's able to break out of the cycle because it's just a constant flare-up of the trauma. And we know that the trauma is there because there was a lack of safety. And when you have a break in your connection, especially with a parent, that does not feel safe. Because the parent is the one you depend on for all your needs. And if you have a break in your connection with parent, now your actual survival is threatened. So one thing I noted here was that education requires a brain that feels safe. So school is not conducive to an adapted defensed child. Right? Like, this traumatized kids can't learn. Like, they can't sit in school and just behave and learn because their number one priority is safety. So, if the school environment feels safe, sure. But the moment that they're told what to do, and it's not something they wanted to do, now you've taken away their sense of control of their environment, and now they feel fear, and now they're activated in their trauma, and their behavior is going to flare up into whatever it is that gets them to diffuse that feeling of lack of safety. And you cannot change anyone's behavior. And she went on to say, which I thought was pretty relevant, you shouldn't try. It is unethical to take away something that is keeping them safe, hence the behavior. If the behavior is there to keep them safe, which it is, to try to take that away from them is unethical because everyone has a right to try to meet their own needs of need for safety, right? I really liked this part because I think it was validating for me because I had mentioned this to someone. There's an acquaintance of mine who advocates on Facebook through a group that he's created to stop circumcision, because actually the act of circumcising a child is quite cruel, and it's not a medically required thing. It's not right. And it's traumatizing. It's very traumatizing. And so we have been passing this along, and it's become an industry, right? Doctors are making money off doing it. And if you've ever witnessed a child who's been circumcised, I feel like you couldn't do that without being traumatized yourself, because it's not okay. But we didn't know what we didn't know, so we're not going to beat ourselves up. So in witnessing him kind of having this group for raising awareness about circumcision and the fact that it is a trauma, I highly approve of that. I think it's wonderful. I wish that I was informed, before it was relevant for me to make those decisions, because I just made the decision that I was told to make. And it was a decision. I was asked, but there was nothing for me to base it on, you know? And I wasn't present enough in my own life to even know that I could do some research, or I could say no, or any of those things. So anyway, what I do know is that when I first realized that this was a trauma for males that had been circumcised, I felt awful, right? Because I had my children circumcised. And I went to my children and I said, I'm so sorry that I did that. And my children were like, what are you talking about? We're fine. And I realized in that moment that I was trying to tell them how to feel about something that had already happened to them, that they had already found a way to cope with, and that they weren't coming to me to try to heal from any trauma about. I was like going to them. It's like going and trying to break the egg from the outside. You know, they say that the chick has to break its way out of the egg because it's really vital that they do that themselves. And that's kind of what this is too. It's like you can't just go and burst somebody's bubble, because that's their coping mechanism. That's their adaptive defense. And they need that to feel safe in the world. So I had mentioned to my friend, he was posting a meme about circumcised men in defense of that. And he said, let's let the debate begin. And I just was kind of like mentioning to him, like it's actually kind of mean to try to debate a man who's trying to defend his circumcision. Because like, if he's not ready to deal with the trauma of that, then it's kind of mean to try to make him do it. And my friend never commented back and didn't reply, and did seem to change his focus on his page to more informative posts, which I think are very important. That's a much different thing than trying to tell people who have had the procedure done that what was done to them was wrong. Why would we do that, you know? So this is the same kind of concept as that, right? It's like whatever coping mechanism is in place, let's let them keep it until it's time for them to question it themselves. And that's a big reason also why I've posed these readings the way I do, as just information to reflect on, as use it at your discretion, use your intuition, only take it if it's helpful to you, right? And if you read my description in the videos, they go on to say that, you know, that you have to take responsibility for how you use this service and all of that. And that's because I recognize, you know, that it's just a little piece of information to reflect on that I'm offering anytime, no matter how deep or dark we go. It's always up to you to take responsibility for you when we're using this. Okay. Like, I don't want to change your behavior. I want you to be responsible for your behaviors always. And your behavior changes. Behavior changes when the person's unmet need is met. So the need for safety. When the need for safety is met, the behavior will change. Simple as that. And you cannot give what you haven't had. I believe we've talked about this on the channel here, at least briefly at some points. So that's why parents aren't being present with their children's need for safety, because no one was present with the parents' need for safety either. It's passed along, right? So the way to fix this is through moments of secure attunement. Repetitively meeting the child or the person where they're at with what they need without trying to change them creates moments of secure attunement. So now you're creating an environment where they can feel safe, and that can lead to secure relationship and secure attachment. So this takes time. This takes just like we've talked about how to love yourself takes time of showing up for yourself day after day after day, of proving to yourself that you have your own back. It's the same thing here. That's what she's saying. And it works with children, and it works with our own inner child. If you have relational trauma, you have to heal in relationship. Yeah, when I wrote this, I was like, yeah, I knew that. But for me, you may or may not know that I've been working on healing relational trauma and studying connection or lack of connection and how to get connection and how to want connection and all this kind of stuff. And of course, it's because I was wired for threat. And safety was something that I didn't necessarily have established, right, until I did it for myself. And there was a point where I was like, darn, I really am going to have to start relating to other people. That was very intimidating for me. But, now I've been doing it for a while, and I just take it at the pace that feels right, and I do it with the people that I discern are appropriate, and, it's going well. I would say it's still in process for me. But I'm really thankful to the relationships that I do have to work on it in. Another interesting thing that she pointed out was systems support disability, not trauma. Right? Look at our systems, our school system, our judicial system. If someone has a diagnosis for a disability, then there are usually accommodations for that in the system. But if someone just has trauma, that's not something that people are making excuses for, right? Like when I kind of like had my breakdown, I got a diagnosis, no one said, oh, she has trauma. I had to figure that out on my own. So this is why it looks like everybody's getting diagnosed with something out there. And trauma is passed through genes or epigenetic, which was like from the environment. And I took some notes on the list of adaptive defenses. The list where adaptive defenses come in with brainstem trauma. And they can be things like hyperactivity, sensory processing difficulty, high and low levels of arousal, impulsivity, huge anxiety, poor muscle tone and coordination, meaning clumsy, specific taste and texture preferences, abnormal breathing, temperature regulation, flashbacks, lack of eye contact, unexplainable medical symptoms, inflammation, and there's more. So, I'm not going to read all her lists because I don't know if that's like considered plagiarism or what, but this is definitely her list. That was right from her class that I took today, Interplay. But the interesting thing about this is those symptoms sound a lot like autism and ADHD. And since those are listed in the DSM, which is the diagnosis manual, a lot of times those will be looked at instead of trauma because trauma is not in that manual as a diagnosis. So people and professionals tend to assign diagnosis instead of identifying the trauma. So that's very interesting. And if you look at the society, a lot of things would have to change, right? Because the way we're dealing with trauma is a lot different than we're dealing with diagnosis. Diagnosis, we're throwing medication at them, and you know, adapting life around them and things like that, which is nice and all, but like it's not how we're going to heal it, because it can be healed because it is trauma. And maybe you wouldn't even try to heal a diagnosis because you don't think you can. So it's kind of a problem to be categorizing it that way. She also touched on limbic and cortex trauma and listed the behaviors that go along with them, which were interesting. And who am I in a world that didn't love me? So at some point, the child, around, she says around age 11, starts to look at who am I? They try to look at, and find out who they are. And that's what they're trying to figure out, is who am I in this world that didn't love me? She says there's no such thing as attention seeking. It's always attachment seeking. Oh, yeah. And they choose the behavior that is an adaptive defense. So taking behavior on face value is not going to solve these issues. This is what I wrote. Or show the truth. Create a sense of safety instead of punishing the fear. All right, I just have to take a little break. I'll be right back and I'll finish up my talk on this. Okay. Back to my notes here. So she says, we set people up to feel our experience. And she showed examples of these things with stories and things. We are wired to share our experiences in a non-verbal way. Okay, so this lends to the story I was trying to share earlier about my son. But basically, it's just saying, like, if I feel like I need to know, or say I feel that you are untrustworthy, right? And then my behavior acts in a way where I make you feel like I'm untrustworthy. So the way that you are interpreting the situation is that I'm untrustworthy. But what that correlates to is my behavior is me showing you that I don't feel you're trustworthy. I am not trusting. Okay, so this is how she's saying we can use these experiences. So you can see how that would correlate, right? Because of the way traumas work. And she's referencing the mirror neurons, which is a system that allows interconnection with another human. It gives insight into another person's experience. The mirror neurons will be working whether you feel it or not, right? So we have some people who really identify with the mirror neurons, maybe calling that themselves empaths, and they are really tuned in to that more subtle energy and can really read the vibrations of the other. So the ability to feel what it feels like to be someone else gives us a window into someone else's world. So it's interesting because here what she's saying is how valuable empathy is, especially in this healing of a child. But this could be used with adults as well, because here I was not using the empathy, right? I was graduated up to compassion. And the empathy is actually giving the ability to eliminate the person's need to express verbally. And that's a really beautiful thing, because a lot of people aren't comfortable with being vulnerable and authentic or verbalizing things. Or they might not have the words. They may not be prepared to articulate it is, and they may not even know. So it's just like using empathy as a tool, in my opinion. She says it's a vital part of this whole process. I can totally understand why and how she's using it. And I think it's wonderful that she's using it that way. I think I'll still use it more like it's a tool, meaning there are appropriate times for it to be used for sure. Let's see. So an example she gave of mirror neurons working, whether you feel it or not, is, have you ever seen a movie and then cried with one of the characters? That would be because your mirror neurons were allowing you to immerse into that experience and feel what the character was feeling. I mean, to me, that gets a little complicated because it's like those are actors. So what are you actually tuning into, right? I mean, it depends on the actor, depends on how good they are, all of that could come into it. Maybe they are really using an actual emotion to act. I don't know. All right, let's move on. Use mirror neuron system instead of asking how they feel. Actually get into the place and the feeling with them is what she's saying. And use this ability to understand others. Child creates fear and sets you up to feel scared. And we use that as a means of communication, right? If the child is, or anyone, if anyone at all in your life is setting you up to feel scared, they're threatening you, whatever it is, this means that they're in fear. And you can use that behavior that they're using as a means of communication. Like they're communicating with you that they are in fear. And that means they are wired for threat, right? So that is an adaptive defense that they're using right there. Okay. So if a child or anyone is doing that, you have the option to feel that fear that they're setting you up, right? They're threatening you, you feel fearful, and then you can either lash out, stop them, yell at them, whatever, set a boundary. And we really do advocate for that, right? And we know that that's really important in some cases, but not in the case of healing with a child or in a relationship where you are wanting to heal together or want to be a healing presence for another. Because in that case, the other option would be to feel the experience, right? You feel that fear and you put it into words and tell it in a way which validates how you feel and what feeling they're trying to show you. Oh, you don't have to threaten me anymore. You don't have to try to make me feel scared anymore because I do feel scared, just like you. Not in a condescending way, but that's the gist of it, right? You'd say it in the words that were appropriate for the situation and who you were talking to. So you can just imagine that people are creating for you what is happening in them when they are traumatized, when they're in an adaptive defense, in a coping mechanism. So this comes into play when you're a person who has cleared enough and healed enough in yourself that you can be a presence for others. So if you're still trying to heal yourself, you don't really necessarily have to focus on other people and doing this for others, right? You really want to focus on doing it for yourself first, or finding someone who can do this for you and with you, right? If this seems like a method that you want to try. She went on to share that we are wired for we, not I. And it takes two to co-regulate. So I have said things like we are pack animals, right? So I get this. This resonates as true for me. And she says adults who cannot regulate, right? If you can't regulate your emotions, it means you've never had someone to co-regulate with. Meaning you didn't have a mother or a parent or a caregiver that responded to your need in infancy and to help you regulate whatever you were feeling, right? The mother picks up the crying baby and soothes the crying baby, and now the baby is regulated with the mother. The mother is teaching the baby to feel what it is to be regulated. And if this isn't happening, then we have people who are not able to regulate. And you know there are other reasons that we can get dysregulated as well. Okay, be authentic about your experience of being with the other. For instance, I feel scared, or like I'm not enough, right? Like if I was going to be telling my kids about my behaviors when they were feeling negative about something, I would have to say, I feel, it makes me, like, I understand that you feel disappointed right now, and I'm afraid to feel that disappointment in myself that didn't teach you how to deal with these situations. You know, just something authentic and real. And it can be, you can fumble your way through it if you need to. And, depending on who you're with, and when you're first learning this, I would imagine that we're going to have to be willing to feel our way through it, right? Seeking for unconditional love takes over if it's never been received. I can attest to that, because the whole first part of my life was about seeking love and avoiding pain. That was it. And it was like I would have done anything for love, People want to be heard and understood. All behavior is searching for safety and connection. Wow, isn't that something? So say you have somebody who's kind of being a jerk and mouthing off to you. And we know that all behavior is searching for safety and connection. Well, they're not trying to connect with you necessarily, so that must mean that in order for them to feel safe, they have to push you away. Every behavior has a need, she says. Then she goes on to touch on addiction, which is very interesting. Addiction is a behavior, and it's an adaptive behavior. And people use addiction instead of attachment. It replaces the want for attachment. So it's kind of like a person who didn't get securely attached to the adult, right? Got wired for threat instead. Still has that unmet need of connection and attachment. And instead falls into an addiction. And the addiction, the hit they get from the addiction, acts just like connection would. But the difference is they always need more to get that hit. So the addiction escalates and ends up causing harm. So addiction increases when people try to change it, she said. Instead, meet the unmet need. So what need is that addiction trying to meet? Meet that need. Addiction can quickly develop if it gives that hit, if it fills that need. You can reattach at any age, she said. Kids age 11 are working out who they are, so behaviors can start then. Okay. She says, just stop and feel the experience. The sense of control in relationship to get connection. I don't know what that is. Okay, that was just my notes. So, rewire the brain by being in safe relationship with them. Takes consistent reliability and repetition. We've talked about that a bit. And this is in regards to rewiring our own brain for our own connection. She mentions core conditions that must be present in a therapeutic environment. These create the opportunity to heal. So, this is equivalent to the safe space that we've talked about, that you need to be in to heal. But she has some that I think are worth mentioning, that if they're appropriate for you, you may want to add to your practice. Create total acceptance. Accept the need behind the behavior if you can't accept the behavior. Work out what the need is, which is probably safety. And she went on to say, be accepting of the caregiver too, if it's a child. So we know, we've talked a lot about acceptance as a key ingredient to healing. And then another ingredient, she says, is being patient. You cannot rush into an individual process, right? And that's what we've been talking about too. Like we're being present. We're not trying to get rid of whatever the feelings are that are present. And then presence is the next ingredient that she mentioned, which is showing up, she says, not being in the head, no thinking at the same time. And you know that I did a video recently on what presence is. You might want to take a look if you want to go into more detail about that. Listening to understand is another ingredient. And I also did a video on that recently. And the video was about effective or ingredients of healthy communication or healthy conversation, something like that, where I go in and talk a little bit about the need to listen to understand and how that might look. Then she adds empathy. Feel their experience, stay present, and don't try to change it. Be in it. And then she adds that authenticity and vulnerability are key ingredients. How safe are you to be real? It's crucial. Know thyself. So the more authentic and vulnerable you can be in an experience with somebody that you're being with through healing trauma, the better. Like that's one of the key ingredients she says is vital. And then unconditional love or positive regard. Unconditional positive regard or unconditional love. And these core conditions create a safe, secure relationship attachment conditions. And it produces hormones. So the hormones of connection, oxytocin, cortisol, opioids, dopamine. So that's why she's kind of listing all these things, because these are the things that get those hormones going. And the hormones are the biological part where our body's catching up and getting the story and all that. So then she goes on to say, she says, you don't teach empathy. Empathy is the thing that creates the cortisol in the kind of soup here. But I thought it was interesting that she said you don't teach empathy, and I get that. I do get that, because it reminds me of a conversation. This is now years ago that I had this conversation, like probably 4 or 5 years ago, with a person. He was telling me that he doesn't believe in empathy, but he does try to teach it to his kid. And I thought that was interesting because, well, first of all, he was telling me something there, right? That he doesn't believe in empathy, meaning he's not down to be like all feely in the feels with people. Which he also later told me at another time that I encountered him too. He told me that he was never going to be dealing in those emotions. And what he was telling me, right, if I were to say that his behavior was communicating a need, what it was the need to be boundaried and logical. He didn't trust, he was probably had been manipulated with emotion as a child, probably by his mother. And so he had, gone a different route. So that's just a side note on that. But I remember thinking, like, how would he teach empathy, especially if he doesn't even believe in it? I didn't have the conversation with him at the time. But what I will mention, and why I'm mentioning this story, is there is such a thing as cold empathy. Cold empathy is where you know what a person is feeling, but you're not willing to go into that feeling. So you just sort of stay on the surface of it, acknowledging it with words and nothing more. It can kind of look like a little bit like sympathy if you're only using words. And it feels nothing like empathy. So I have had encounters with people who only strictly used cold empathy. And it was confusing for me at first before I understood what was going on. Because these people would seem kind and nice and understanding and but then when I would have an actual situation where I was upset, this one particular person was actually my ex. He could not get into the field with me, but he could pretend that he cared by using some words. And I could just tell by the way it felt that he was unwilling to go there. So again, if I had followed the model of what is his behavior trying to show me, it would just be that he wasn't able to access those places in himself, right? So how could he do that for me? So it's nothing against him. That was his particular coping strategy for that. But that felt a lot different than real empathy, and that was very triggering for me, right? It was triggering for me to have a person pretend that they were showing up, but not really show up. And I think that's where we go back to that one of those core things that she mentioned, which is authenticity and vulnerability. Because if you can't be authentic, you really can cause damage to yourself if you're pretending and you're lying to yourself. Or if you're with another person, they're not going to be able to trust you if you're not being authentic. And another example that I had with someone using cold empathy was, I was sharing something about my life, a detail, and I wasn't particularly upset about it at all. But because she wasn't tuned into the emotional body, she was only accustomed to using cold empathy with people. She thought that it was an appropriate time to use empathy. And what it felt like energetically was she was trying to bring me down into some sort of, it was like more of a sympathy that she ended up using, but it was like, she was like, oh, that's really awful. And like what I had said, I didn't feel awful about it. You know, it was just a matter of fact thing for me. And it triggered me pretty hard right in that moment, because I may not have been bothered by the thing I was sharing, but I was really bothered by this person who was overtly trying to fake kindness, because I realized, oh my gosh, like this person is not authentic. This person is a faker. And I was trying to be friends with her, and then in that moment I just knew this isn't going to work out. But I went home and worked on my own trigger, and of course correlated it with any relationship that I was relationship issues that I had suffered with, like my mom or anyone who wasn't able to meet me in the place where I was, who was like trying to manipulate me with their own agenda. And that was just like because what she was doing wasn't real empathy. So, can't teach empathy, and also empathy can't be faked, because it will have different effects. Empathy is really being in the emotion with somebody, and what that does is it amplifies the emotion, meaning if there's one person feeling something, okay, but if there's two people now feeling it, now it's real big, and you can really be present with it, right? So you can see where it could really be beneficial in this process of healing trauma. Okay, so she goes on, she covers what activates the certain hormones. And then she listed the toys that would be helpful for children to play with in order to have them communicate whatever need they have. And that's because children communicate through play, which play is a behavior. So that pretty much concluded the seminar that I attended, which was very beneficial, very worthwhile. And I'd really just wanted to add those things in here because I do talk so much about trauma. I have shared with you so much about my view of it, my methods, and I really liked that this expanded view offered some things that I wasn't focused on or utilizing that may be very beneficial and probably needed for some people in some situations, right? And there was a lot of room for improvement in me when it comes to really handling some of the things that would make me less comfortable, like if behaviors come out from the shadow and it's like someone's being mean to someone else, instead of holding space for that person to figure it out, I think sometimes I would probably need to soften and maybe add a little empathy, because that might be a person who's not used to even like being with the feeling. So if I can be with the feeling and help them to get it amplified a little, I think that's worth a try. So that's what I'm going to kind of experiment with going forward as we do these readings. So let's see, this reading. Now I'm going to give you a reading. So if you stayed for that whole intro, awesome. I hope that it was helpful and you got something out of it. And if you have anything to add or a question or a perspective for me to consider, I'm certainly open to it. Let's do... I'm just like scrolling up through my notes to kind of remind myself. I had some ideas for what my reading would be, but now they're not coming to mind. So let me just see if I can bring my memory back on them. I love how when I just said the word bring my memory back on them, I was scrolling past the word memory lapse under cortex traumas. Okay. Trauma, disabilities, moments of secure attunement, meet the unmet need. All right, let's look at this. What is something that you're doing for the purpose of keeping you safe? What is something that you are doing for the purpose of keeping you safe? Pick one, pick two, pick three. I feel like I have to keep repeating it so that I don't forget it when I post this. What is something that you are doing with the purpose of keeping yourself safe? Okay. Let's see. Pick one. What is something pick one is doing in order to, with the purpose of keeping themselves safe? You'll have to decide if this is tied to a trauma or not, right? There was a time in my life where I was perpetually keen on learning something new all the time. And you may also feel compelled to, or just knowledge hungry, or just want to know more, want to know everything. Something pick one is doing with the purpose of keeping themselves safe. Comparison. Making sure you don't stand up too much, making sure you're not left behind, making sure that people like you as much as they like others, making sure that you're doing as much as others, succeeding as much as others, being appreciated as much as others. Tending to the practical things, so what comes to mind is like the fact that I clean my son's home to keep him safe, right? So he doesn't get in trouble with his landlord. So, like, is there anything practical that you're doing in order to help yourself feel safe? It could just be anything, right? Like locking the door, double checking the door, retracing your steps, going the same path, going to the same place every day, taking the same route to work every day. Something pick one is doing for the purpose of keeping safe. Unconditionally loving. Ungrounded, like head in the clouds, dreaming, thinking a lot. Having faith. That's wonderful, like knowing that you can align with God and the will of the universe in order to trust that things are happening for you. You're healing. And you're cutting out things that no longer serve you. So if you're not doing the unhealthy comparisons, perhaps you are comparing to an older version of yourself to celebrate how far you've come. Maybe you're tending to the practical things because you used to let them go. This looks very promising here, pick one. Like, you're actually indulging in potentially very healthy behaviors. So the one thing that we'd want to look at here is, like, if you are doing these things just to feel safe, then what is the threat if you didn't do them? And maybe just, can you be present with any feelings that come up of not feeling safe? Or do you have someone that can be present with you if that's more appropriate for you? But if you're doing these things as a way of showing yourself that you are safe, that's wonderful. Okay, it's just a very short reading. I know for that long intro, I was kind of feeling like, oh, should I be trying to dig some more? And no, I feel like that's okay. We can just make these short. So remember, that's just information to reflect on. Take what's helpful, leave the rest, and here's pick 2. Tell us about what pick 2 may be doing with the purpose of feeling safe. You're behaving in line with your own values. You're keeping up with deadlines. You may be keeping somebody in your life that makes you feel safe, or who's a protector of you, who might even, like, make your reputation look better or something like that. You look for long-term effects, long-term investment is, you look ahead. You're trusting yourself. Oh, so good. Maybe you're still doing something, or that you actually don't realize that you don't have to do anymore. Like, you're keeping up with it because you think it's what's meant to be done, but maybe you don't realize that you could let it go now, or you are in the practice of letting something go when it's done. Perhaps you are appreciating yourself, or if you're appreciating others in order to feel safe, like they'll like me if I appreciate them, that's something to look at. You may not be showing the authentic version of yourself because you may not trust that people will love you and appreciate you and or even recognize you. So there may be some sort of way that you're acting, puffing up your chest in a way, or just not letting people see any vulnerabilities, or acting, not letting people see the truth of you in some way. You're letting yourself be bored. Maybe you don't want to take risks. You don't want to try because failure would be too painful. So it looks like you're in process overall, right? There's some things that you're working on, and there's some things you've worked through. You're delaying. So if you have to move forward in something, it's like that makes you vulnerable. So instead you're kind of putting it off. Maybe you procrastinate in general. Let's see. You're not letting yourself see certain things. Okay, I'm getting a bigger sense of the energy that's in this pile. And let's see, pick 2 things you're doing with the intention of feeling safe. There's a bit about image here, okay? And maybe you just haven't been able to show people the real you. You don't trust people to be with it. And then there is at least some situation or person that's just comfortable, and maybe you've been putting off letting it go, but you know that it needs to go. You're letting yourself get bored. So you're not letting yourself be stimulated or invest in life or pursue your passions or, things like that. So instead of leaving behind the old way, it's like you're continuing on and starting a new cycle in the old way. So you've already done all this stuff. That's why you feel bored. You've already kind of outgrown the stage you're in, but in order to feel safe, you're kind of just hanging out in it, and you haven't let yourself grow. So your need for safety is outweighing your need for growth at this time. You know what to expect in the environment that you're in and how you're living and what you're doing. So it feels safe. That's why you're doing it. And this is alluding to the fact that there is more for you. There is a moving forward, that you're not letting yourself see it. And the new cycle would actually bring you out of some of this comfort zone and some of this feelings of safety. So as you do things to make yourself feel more safe, that's like all those core things that we talked about in the intro that are needed for a comfortable space to heal in. That comfort can replace this comfort that you're living in. You know what I mean? Like, give yourself unconditional presence and love and authenticity and vulnerability and acceptance and patience and, just all that stuff that we mentioned there. And then have that be the space that you take with you forward, which, just be comfortable in the fact that you're going to be present with whatever comes up for you. And so presence is just being the parent to whatever feeling comes up. And feelings can really feel overwhelming and like something you want to avoid when the parent, used feelings to manipulate you in younger years. And that is an example I used in the intro as well. So, and I'm kind of getting that sense here. It could be underlying that, right? And this expired soul contract could be a situation or a person that's kind of reactivating that wounding in you. Is this person also manipulating you through emotional means? You trust yourself to handle yourself and keep yourself safe in this situation. That's why you're in it. That's why you're doing it. Okay? Remember, this is just information to reflect on. So only take what is helpful to you. I want to just assure you that this is a perfectly normal human way to go through life. I've found myself at this place many, many times over the years. And it's just like a plateau. And then when you're able to do what you need to do for yourself to feel safe, and now that you understand that that's what it is, that's why you're doing these things, you can work on helping yourself feel safe, earning back your own trust for trusting yourself outside of this circumstance. It's kind of interesting because I really relate to this because it's the difference between knowing there's a big, big world out there, but not really feeling like you need to go indulge in it. And the feeling of, oh, there's a big, big world out here. I'm kind of curious. Let's go check it out. Like, that's the difference for me when I step out of the feeling of I'm not safe. I mean, it was that much contrast for me. It was the difference between me wanting to live and, like live, like go and indulge in all the great things that there are about being alive, and me just being content being at home all the time and with my own company. Even though I wasn't bored, I was just in a consistent safe space for a while. And now my safe space is nice, but it's not like protective. Now it's like, yeah, I like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Like, I like to go live a bit, and I like that I can also spend some time by myself, but I don't need to spend time by myself to feel safe anymore. And I used to. And I used to look at the big world and all the things that I could be doing and think, oh, I should be doing that, but I just don't want to. That's what it felt like. So there may be some sort of contrast like that you may not even be aware of yet, that you're holding yourself back from. That things will shift, that the kind of adaptive behavior that you've taken up is also not letting you see what else there is for you outside of this comfort and this safety net that you've made for yourself. Okay? And it's not terrible to use another person as your sense of safety while you need that. It's just like, whatever means you got to do your growth is what you use. Like, there's nothing's gone wrong here. You've been living, surviving, coping, and then even facing the things that you need to. Like, just by being at this reading, I know that you're willing to look at things. So, you're doing it. Okay. Remember, it's just information to reflect on, so only take what is useful to you. Leave the rest. Okay, pick 3. Tell us what pick 3 is doing with the purpose of feeling safe. Whoa, these like flew out. That doesn't usually happen out of this bucket like that. Like, sometimes one will pop out, but like these flew. Okay. melancholia. So that's like a sadness, you know. Fascinated. I get the sense that, you know, you may be depressed, and you also may be watching movies and watching other people's lives. You might be try to feed yourself good food so that you can stay fit. And maybe it's for feeling safe and that you won't get picked on or called out, or, you know, any detrimental effects with your health. But it could be that you know that your health is valuable to you, so you do want to keep your body safe, so you're just feeding it well. You're giving yourself a good amount of stimulation in life, and you're also letting yourself feel the feelings that don't feel good. So this could be, you know, from a very healthy stance still, and it could be if you're doing this only for the purpose of feeling safe in a lower density way. You'll know that better than me. Well, this is saying healer, so you may be healing so that you can feel safe, but you also may be doing a little bit of shape-shifting, fitting in, really like maybe paying attention to what other people think is interesting and not necessarily being driven by your own inner urge, like easy to jump on a fad kind of thing. Let's see. You might be excluding yourself or excluding someone else so that you feel safe. You might be excluding something from your diet so that you feel safe. Like an example would be, I have been in relationship with men who are alcoholics, and when I was, I would just not drink. They would drink, and if I drank too, then it would be too chaotic. So in order to keep myself safe, I would exclude alcohol from my intake. That's just an example of. Okay. You may be a little bit of beating yourself up, taking some self-blame in order to feel safe. So if you're feeling regret in order to feel safe, maybe it's like you don't yet trust yourself that you've learned what you needed to learn in order to make a better decision next time. Because that's all that really needs to happen. You don't have to dwell on, you know, mistakes from the past. You just have to decide what you want to do next time if that were to come up, or what you've learned, or what's valuable about the experience that you've had. How did you feel? Be present with anything, you know, any feelings that were there. Sorry, I had a little mini ant crawling on me. Oh, do you see? Yeah, these guys have found their way into my house today. I'm not sure what to do about them. Okay. Oh. Maybe you've been doing some research about spirituality, about some of the experiences that you're having or symptoms that you're having. And maybe you've come to understand that you are integrating a higher version of yourself at this time, and that maybe somehow the information about that, the trust in that, the knowing that is helping you feel safe. Like knowing that there's a higher version of yourself ready to come in and integrate with you and like take the wheel in a way. You know what I mean? Like, so regret could be about not doing it sooner. And there could be fears coming up with this, right? Like, if you know that another version of your soul is going to walk in to your body and help you navigate, then there might be part of you that kind of feels like overlooked or not really important anymore and all kinds of stuff. But in order to feel safe with all these changes that you're going through, you're being pushed energetically. All the things that are lower density are kind of being brought up to your awareness, and you're being forced to deal with them. And acknowledging that is helping you feel safe, right? Like just learning about the whole process that you're in, which seems to be a big process, actually. You know, when we look at a spiritual process that you're going through, you are actually like about to take a turn and pick up the pace in your life, and what you've done up to this point is not going to be anything like what you're doing after now. So in order to feel safe, I think you are maybe practicing being that, finding out about that, maybe mourning the version of you that won't get to run the show anymore, getting your body ready. Yeah. Thinking about all the things that you didn't get to do yet. Because now, you know, with this version of you, this higher version of you that comes in, it's like the other part of your life is like done, right? And there may be part of you that like needs to kind of still cling to that story and in order to feel safe through this process, which must feel a lot like upheaval, right? Because your whole life is changing. So this shape-shifting is actually like something that is happening to you, I can see. Because when we get walk-in, that means like, you know, a higher version of your soul, or another soul altogether in some cases, but is coming into your body. And that is a fascinating thing, right? Wow. Yeah. You're giving yourself the unconditional love you need. The sad parts and the regretful parts of you. Helping yourself feel content and just like shining a light on whatever it is. So enough of this high version of yourself must be integrated into you for you to be at this place that you're at, which is like literally caretaking yourself through an enormous shift in how you are being on Earth. You are caretaking yourself through and into a safe transition, a transition, and it's like a very healthy thing to do. Yeah, I feel like you definitely got this. All right. So remember, it's just information to reflect on. Only take what's helpful to you. Thank you for being here at this time and for joining us and for doing the good stuff. And that completes your reading.